Before J-Lo and Salma Hayek, before Hollywood talked about Latina visibility, there was Raquel Welch, the fur bikini from 1 Million Years BC, the smoldering gaze, the Golden Globe winner who defined an era. But behind the bombshell was Jo Raquel Tejeda, a Bolivian-American daughter, a single mother pushed to erase her heritage just to survive in Hollywood. I Am Raquel Welch, streaming on Crave presently, strips away the glitz to reveal grit. Directed by Olivia Cheng, the film uses rare family archives, candid interviews, and Raquel's own voice to show the woman behind the legend, a trailblazer who defied Hollywood's limits long before it was popular. Now, Raquel Welch passed away in February of 2023 at 82 after a brief illness. Cardiac arrest was the cause, with Alzheimer's as a factor. Her 5-decade career included over 30 films and 50 TV shows. The documentary honors her full story, the fame, the fight, and of course, the fierce woman at its core. Joining me now to talk about this issue is director Olivia Cheng. Olivia, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jas. Thanks for having me on.
Lots to talk about. And what drew you to Raquel Welch's story?
I remember the moment that Derek Murray from Vancouver's Network Entertainment called me. It was in the middle of the strike, the actor-writer strike that was historic for our industry. And he was calling to check my availability and interest to do this. And I'll be honest, I knew the name, and I had this fuzzy image of a woman, beautiful woman in a bikini, and I remember her big hair that she was famous for, but I didn't really know the story behind the iconic image. And Derek said, I gotta take another call, take an hour, I'll call you back. So I immediately, Googled her, and it was on the Wikipedia page where a male co-star of hers, it was a little story about reporters saying, oh, hey, you're gonna be working with Raquel Welch in your next project, what do you think? And he said something, this isn't word for word, but he said something along the lines of like, well, I don't know if she can act, but what a body. And that kind of made me go, whoa, like what would it have been like to be the biggest sex symbol in the world of that era at a time when women couldn't even own credit cards or own their own homes without a husband or father co-signing for them. And the fact that her story collided with the civil rights movement of America, the Vietnam War, and then the second wave of feminism where women were fighting for, financial autonomy, for things like domestic violence and marital rape to be criminal. And yet here she is like, almost at odds with that era of feminism, even though she should have been like the poster child in a way for it. I was just fascinated by all those elements, and I just was like, I'm in.
So with a story that is that rich, with someone who has accomplished so much, and it's not a question of not enough content. The question is too much content. So how do you, as a director, and you've been on this program before, you're a longtime actor as well, and a former broadcast journalist, how do you whittle away that? How do you whittle away all of that to get to what you need to get to? Like, walk me through that process.
That's a great question, and I feel like that's you as a documentary maker understanding that. I luckily had a bit of a roadmap. Raquel wrote a memoir called Behind the Cleavage, or Beyond the Cleavage, before she died. And I could see the themes that she wanted to leave out there for people to think about, the stories she had put out there. So the themes where I think she felt, well, I don't want to talk about how she felt or didn't feel. I never met her, but it was clear that there were certain topics that she wanted her perspective known. And because this is a tribute documentary, my job was to pay tribute to her. So I took the themes that I saw her putting out there, and then there was plenty of archival material to, sort of prove what she was saying, that these were the kinds of situations she was in, or these were, the hurdles she had to face as a woman who was so objectified by the world. And you are right. Like, there is so much archival footage of Raquel. Like, there is actually very high quality footage footage of her in 1958 winning the statewide beauty fair, and it's shot in like, it looks like a movie. It's shot in the best cameras of the day. They've got a close-up of the crown being put on her. It was extraordinarily exquisite footage. It was also like $30,000 for 30 seconds. Like it was, so we had an amazing archival team, and they were able to, Joanna Pierce was able to, find all kinds of, photographs from the family that we would maybe insert instead, or, license like radio content so we could get her audio. We really had to dig around to find something to put together, and we whittled away very pragmatically, because sometimes we just couldn't afford the footage that exists of her. And then sometimes it just didn't, it was a great piece of footage, but maybe we couldn't get it for another reason, or maybe it just didn't fit the ultimate themes and interviews that we started to get.
Well, I was mentioning her Bolivian roots. What was her childhood like, and in regards to your research, what did you learn from her? Because I mentioned she was a single mom as well, but can you talk to me about just her formative years?
Yeah, so Raquel was born to Josephine Sarah Hall, a woman of English ancestry who's, traced back to like Mayflower days. And then her father was Carlos Tejada, an immigrant from Bolivia, came over at 18 to be an engineering student. And he refused to speak Spanish in the house. I don't think he wanted the kids to grow up with an accent. And remember, this was a time, we're seeing what's happening over the border right now to, the brown community. So I think we have sort of a topical reference to how hard it can be for, the Latin American community in America. And at that time, there was corporal punishment in schools if Spanish was spoken. Kids who spoke with an accent were like automatically failed. There were signs that, no insert racial slur, in restaurants and public spaces. So it was, I think, to assimilate the kids, I think was perhaps like a survival tactic that I think many immigrant families are aware of. So,
and it was also a difficult relationship, right?
Yes, actually, yes. She would allude to her father being a tyrant throughout her career. And she tells one story in her memoir about standing up to her father at 16 after he dumps a glass of milk on her mother's head at dinner, and she finally had had enough, so she grabbed a poker and threatened to kill her father if he ever touched her mother again. And her fourth husband, Richie Palmer, actually in her documentary, sort of is the first to actually name it as it was a home with domestic violence. So in a way, I think that also fascinated me, that she had to learn to fight and stand up. And in a way, it was like a training ground for what she then encountered in Hollywood, I believe.
How does a woman with that, who dealt with that trauma at that age, and in the documentary we learned she's a single mom as well, end up in Hollywood at that level? Like, explain that journey to me.
She knew from a very young age. I think sometimes when people are extraordinary, you hear that from a very young age. They knew that this was what they wanted to do. So as a child, she watched a movie called, I think, The Red Shoes. It was about a ballerina who couldn't stop dancing, I believe. And she, after that day, she talks about like she wanted to be an actress so bad. She would put on like plays in her garage and invite the neighborhood kids to come watch. She would actually be able to sort of appease her father by performing songs off the radio. So clearly, she had an affinity for it. Her mother put her into theater classes, so she actually grew up training to do musical theater because that's what she watched in like the 1940s. And then by the time she got to Hollywood, the big musical numbers were dying off, and you had more the adult contemporary fare, like In the Heat of the Night, coming in. But yeah, she trained from the time she was 7 years old.
Wow. Now, Olivia, one of the interesting things I found is a quote in the film. Welch is saying, "A part of me was missing What does that line mean to you as a filmmaker? It's one of the ones in her film, I think. She says, "The part of me was missing." What did she mean by that?
Oh, in that she was in her 50s, and she was looking back at, I think, her sort of purposeful, or I shouldn't say it was hers, but because her father sort of disconnected his children from their Spanish heritage, she really started to look back at that piece of her life in her 50s. And she actually ended up traveling to Bolivia for the first time when she was 52, 53. So that specific line, she was talking to a journalist, and they were asking about, do you think you would have made it if you had gone by your maiden name? And she was like, Raquel Tejada, not a chance. So she was talking about the impact that her father's decision sort of left on her, that she felt like there's this piece of her missing culture-wise.
Where did she fit into the Hollywood power structure in regards to, she's an action star. We've talked about her being a single mom. She was a sex symbol. Where did she fit in that time in regards to the Hollywood power structure?
Well, I think the quickest way to answer that, to help people understand the level at which she sort of exploded onto the scene, was Marilyn Monroe died in 1966, was it? Don't come for me if I'm a little off on these dates, but once Marilyn Monroe passed away, there was arguably this void that was left. And the same studio that had Marilyn under contract then signed Raquel Welch. So you could, historians like, Luis Reyes, who wrote Viva la Hollywood, historians argue that you could say that the torch was kind of passed from Marilyn Monroe to Raquel Welch.
Raquel Welch.
Yeah.
Now, Raquel Welch was also involved in a lawsuit with MGM,
Yes.
I think in the 1980s. And one could argue when you see this and read about it, it does focus on ageism and sexism and so much of those issues that we're talking about now, not only in society, but also in Hollywood as well.
I feel like that alone could have been its own documentary, like reading through the transcripts of what happened in court, reading her then husband's, Andre Weinfeld's, testimony about what he sort of witnessed on set. It's fascinating, but, a quick recap for people who don't know or have forgotten. Raquel Welch actually successfully sued MGM Studios for feeling like she was bait and switched, meaning that they used her to get financing for a film, but the whole time they were in cahoots with her own agents and agencies to sort of, create a problem and fire her or dump her because they really wanted a younger Deborah Winger for the role. And this was opposite Nick Nolte in a John Steinbeck adaptation called, oh my God, I'm blanking right now what the movie was called, but yeah, she was just sort of ceremoniously dumped, and she said, no, like, I'm not taking this sitting down. This is a breach of contract. And here's the thing, Raquel was highly intelligent. You just listen to a few clips of her. She was incredibly eloquent, incredibly well-spoken, and like I said, she learned to stand up to her father. I think that same ability to go, no, this isn't right, also kicked in when that happened, and she successfully sued and was awarded $10 million in damages. At the end, the studio tried to appeal. I think the court awarded her even more by the time she won the appeal. So it was like a 6-year process. And that lawsuit actually stood as a legal reference for other lawsuits around discrimination. And people have forgotten that Raquel Welch, sort of planted her flag in the sand around that issue, and that others, even outside of the industry of Hollywood, benefited from that.
Well, it's interesting also in the sense that today it still takes a lot of courage for people to come out and speak out, especially women to speak out, especially in an industry
Absolutely.
like Hollywood. To think that someone like her did that in the 1980s and won speaks to her character and her strength. Now, we talked a little bit about her father. Her son, Damon, is a key voice in the film. What was his involvement like in dealing with him and just in regards to what he was saying?
Damon is like one of the most incredibly sweet souls. He wanted to be part of this as, I think, like he said, I want to make my mom proud. So as, one of her only living relatives who witnessed that era of, his memories started from sort of comforting his mom when she didn't have enough money to pay the milkman, to then remembering getting to go onto Hollywood Palace and starting to realize that, wow, my mom's a big deal, to joking about meeting the Queen. And then Raquel Welch actually met the Queen, and she's standing next to like Ursula Andress and Woody Allen, curtsying to the Queen. We also could not afford that footage, but we have photos. He really is sort of the heart of the documentary because, his testimonial is very moving, and his emotion is moving. And I actually put together almost like a little pop-up museum for him with artifacts that I had found in Raquel's personal storage, so that he could physically, touch the newspaper clippings all the way from like the 1950s and see, Raquel Tejada, the fairest of the fair, and actually see these, artifacts of his mother's life just right in front of him. And then we filmed it, and we used a lot of that B-roll in the documentary to capture his, immediate reaction to, what we kind of set up for him.
Yeah. We only have a minute left, but I did want to ask you this. What do you think, what do you want young actors, especially women, to take from this story?
That's a great question. I think to understand, I feel like there's something around knowing what power means for you as a woman, because it can shift and change. When you're young, your beauty and youth has so much to do with it because of the society we're in, right? The obsession over it. And then how that power changes as, you age and you become a wise woman, and maybe some people try to push you out. But this was a queen of reinvention and evolution, and she refused to be pushed out by anyone. She lived up by her own terms, and I think that's what I would want young women to take from it.
The film is called I Am Raquel Welch, which is streaming on Crave. It's directed by Vancouver's Olivia Cheng. So good to see you again. Drop by anytime.
Thanks, Jas.
All right.